was in
No, when we had the shop, that was
Harlesden.
Harlesden.
Oh,
That was 98 Craven Park Road, Harlesden.
yes.
It was right on the main road, the Edgware Road from Marble Arch, right the way out to Wembley Stadium.
And did you live above the shop then? Or
yeah, the whole family. In fact, everybody was born there except except Jack and Bob, because Bob used to tell me stories how when they were moving from Crown Hill Road, which was only a quarter of a mile away, Mum had hold of his hand, Jack was there, and she was carrying Albert.
Mm.
So everybody, Albert onwards, were born in the house, didn't go to hospital.
Mm.
There was a midwife, the same one for everybody,
Mm.
and she just used to be called regular intervals.
And then you moved
Yes,
to
that's
Grosvenor
right.
Gardens, so you said?
Yeah, no,
Grosvenor.
Dad was the shopkeeper, and when he went to Grosvenor Gardens, he took a half shop in Wembley and carried on. This was Wembley. Well, Dad, shall I say, didn't have a particularly pure life. He drank a lot, smoked a lot, and drinking was sometimes to excess. So I think he paved his way. He had his first stroke in about 1940, and Bob came up, and Jack came up. And I can remember Dad, and the three of us had a good laugh because the bloke in the bed next door, was only two people in this ward. This old chap kept on going, like that, and old Jack said, "Shall we shoot now?" Something was coming up to it. It wouldn't be the Banksy without turning it into a laugh. Yeah. Oh, he used to hit her, and Mum used to throw plates at him to stop him advancing. Terrible, absolute terrible scenes. And over the years I've thought in my mind what it was all about, and I say that I can imagine that Mum, she's an Aspinall, and the Aspinalls are very hot-headed, and the men turn to fighting, and the women are quite tough. I think she had cause. To put it in Dickensian terms, she's trying to run a shop, selling second-hand furniture and books and things. No money, kids waiting to be fed. She had to sell something and then sell one of the oldest one along to David Gregg's to get something to eat. I say she had provocation and justification. She probably went out a bit too hammer and tonksy, but Dad was a bastard. He behaved abominably, had no sense of responsibility. Kids should be seen but not heard. This is what he kept on telling us. So, you know, in many, many ways, he was a very, very weak character. More ways than I care to say at this moment. I know he was a weak character. So anyway, virtually the only person doing anything for Mum has been me all along, yes. And Sis in her turn. Yes. But Flo wouldn't have much to do with her. Helen and Kath, totally indifferent. In fact, when Mum came home, Kath had her down at Plymouth Ostensibly for holiday. 2 days later she rang and she said, "I put Mum on a train, she's arriving at wherever it was, Reading at such and such a time." With due respect to Jack, Bob and Albert, they never had anything to do with the parents at all. No. Not a thing. Jack wouldn't have them in the house, wouldn't acknowledge them as his parents. He hated them. Bob was full of good intentions, but he didn't follow it through. When Mum was at Shaw Court, which is a place I fixed her up with in Old Windsor, residential home with a warden, doing her own thing, Bob called in, he's regularly coming back and forth to Ealing, but he called in there once in about 10 years. So Mary's been a brick. She's put up with my dad when he was in circuit, put up with Mum. We used to have her over every weekend. So yeah, they didn't like Mary. I shouldn't have married Mary.
I remember you telling me that.
Yeah, not strong enough.
Not strong enough.
Looks weak, pale, not going to last a long time, incapable. They don't know the first thing about her. She's the most capable girl you could meet.
Yes.
And she's proved herself. Well, look at her now. Look, she's just rising 70 inches. Fit as if it. Yeah. So anyway, they took a dislike. I think what it is, I'm the baby of the family, and they all try to run my life. My sister certainly did. Always telling me what to do and what not to do. And the only person who supported me going into the Air Force was Mum, because she had to sign the form, and Dad wouldn't. Told her off for doing it. Bob told her off. You shouldn't have done. And then he'd go into the Air Force, he'd get killed, he'd do this and do the other and all that stuff. But Mum, I think, from a sense of pride or something. But the Aspinalls are like that. Many of them went in the forces and, you know, did very well. So anyway, she did that. When he was left alone, when I left Queen's Court, and Mum said, "Well, now you're going, I'm going." She said, "I can't face him," because I used to have to intervene physically to stop Dad from knocking her about. So she said, I'm not going to stay here. I've seen you all come and all go, because they tried to get a divorce between the wars.
Oh, did they?
Yes, well, Mum did. And anyway, because there's no hope for a wife.
No,
You know.
not in those
And I
days.
know we got around, the girls used to say to me, you've got to decide whether you're going with Mum or with Dad. I can remember distinctly, and I was about this high. You know. So anyway, it didn't come off. So anyway, she did have a rough time. And she has my sympathy, as I told you. So anyway, when I left, she left, and Dad was left at Queen's Court on his own. So he moved upstairs. No, he stayed downstairs, or the other way around, and got a lady to share the house. But eventually he found that was too much. And his sisters, Edie and Cecil, were living with Granny Banks at Hillingdon, and there was a room, the box room, that was available for Dad, so he went with them. And he was quite comfortable. He was being looked after very well by his sisters. They're both maiden sisters, you know. And so when I came home from America, Mary met me at Willesden Green, Wembley Park Station, and she said, well, I don't know where you're going to go. She said, because Dad's got rid of Queen's Court. I thought, oh, gosh. As it happens, I would have gone to Bristol to be with Bob, because Kath and Helen had already done this. Or we're going to do this. Bob had an open house, very friendly. So anyway, they said, no, you come on round there, because they wanted me in the family, you see. So anyway, I used to come home and I'll leave to Mary's place. Fred said to me one day, he said, well, he said, I hope, don't you're being rude, he said, but I hear that, you know, you're not willing to have Dad come to live with you. And I said, well, at the moment, we've only got 2 rooms and a thing. I said, we couldn't take her here anyway. But anyway, Fred, I said, why should I land Mary with a decrepit old man, because I despise my father in many, many ways. He had no teeth, and the ones he had got all black and yellow. He never combed his hair, he never wore socks, he was dirty, he smelt. And I said, why should a girl marry me and then have to look at my father? I said, I've got 4 sisters. Of course you have, he said. So he said, I understand, Tony, and that was the end of the pressure. So anyway, somehow or another the girls said, well, you better come over here. Sis in particular, the biggest hearted of the lot, I might tell you. Even though, you know, she had all this experience when she was more or less kicked out of the house. Time cures. She had him up at Brisbane. And I've met Peter and John. I've met Judy lately. And they all said, oh, he's quite an old eccentric. I said, eccentric is a very good word for it. Yeah. One, she was frightened out of her life when she heard that Dad had arrived in the country. And she went, so what can I do? And I said, well, I don't think I'll necessarily make touch. And he didn't. But anyway, then when she died, she was left out with the girls who didn't have a lot of time for her for one reason or another. So I said, well, you'd better come home. And I've got a compassionate ticket for her from British Airways, BOAC. She came home on a Britannia. And in Old Windsor, there was a caravan site, and there were places to rent. We got her fixed up with that. And then I got her into the house. It was called Ramping Cat Cottage, the owners. They had rooms to let. She went in there. And then at that time, I was on the council, Windsor Rural District Council, and they had something called the Institute Field, which had in their housing potential stock, and I got motions passed that we develop it. And we have some above average council houses, because most of the council houses are pretty standard, and there's a time now when affluency was coming forward. And I said, well, they don't all want to go and buy a house, they can't all do it, but let's give them some decent council houses. They did. And I said we should have an old folks residential home, because there's nothing like it. There was one in Ascot in the same council, but Old Windsor had been neglected. So they built Shaw Court, and they asked people to come along and view it, and I said to Mum, well, by then she'd got into Kingsby Drive, which was a council ground floor flat, cold as nothing, terrible place, and she was going to, you know, suffer badly there. So anyway, I said, well, I'll take you around and show these, Mum, you might like it. Oh, I'm not going around there, so I'm not even going to look at them. So I said, well, come on, put your coat on. So she went round there, and she saw the show flat. She fell in love with it, so they gave her one. I had to come out from the committee meeting, the housing committee meeting, because they knew that it was my mum, but I mustn't be in the room, as it were. And they did allocate her, and she was happy as a sandboy for 10 years. Well, that was just round the corner from where we were, so she used to come to all the parties, wherever we went, we took her. I've pushed her in the wheelchair up here at Windsor Park, quite a long days round the big lake and that. She came over here most every weekend, and Mary developed something called Granny-in-law's throat, because she'd be speaking normally, and I said, well, I'll go and get Granny now. By the time he came to the door, hello, Granny.
Feeling so good.
She's been a brick with Mum, really has. And of course Mum eventually saw what I saw in Mary, a thoroughly capable, competent, nice girl. So, you know, they were jumping conclusions because they weren't bombastic like the rest of the family. She
So
wasn't
is she
for me.
buried around here? No.
Mum, yes, is an East Hampstead crematorium. Dear Jack went into the army in about 24.
That makes
It's about
that.
28, 29.
No.
Because he had this runaway period when he was 14 and I was just born. Now let's look at Albert. He looks like a late teenager there, doesn't he? Albert was 10 years older than me. So could Albert be 14 or 15? And then the girls all look quite young. Now this one is Sissy, and that's Flo. It's Kath and Helen. Helen's 18 months older than me, so if I'm 4 or 5, she's 6.5. She's 2 years older than me, 8.5. That does more or less tie down the date quite well.
Yes.
And Bob was on working in the Jewish area of London, Tottenham Court Road, and he went from there. Later on, he went on to this chromium plated venture, which took him all over Norway and Sweden and things. Chromium plated the RE engine King George V, or what bits that were chromium plated, he and his partners. And Albert joined him eventually, but so Albert doesn't look as though he's working there.
I think they worked in Paris for a bit.
They did, it's on this chromium plating thing, yeah.